Hi, everybody. I'm Mary Beth Horsington on behalf of the Strathmore Speaker Series. Thanks so much for stopping in here tonight. Under normal circumstances, we'd be holding this event at the Fire Barn in Onondaga Park in the Strathmore neighborhood, but COVID threw a wrench in that plan. Fortunately, the Onondaga Free Library offered to provide the technical assistance we need to bring you this program, so many thanks to them. The Strathmore Speaker Series is made possible through the generous support of the City of Syracuse, the Gifford Foundation, and the Greater Strathmore Neighborhood Association. Our guest speaker tonight is Strathmore neighbor Michael Streissguth, whose 9th book was recently published. City on the Edge, Hard Choices in the American Rust Belt follows the stories of 5 Syracuse residents and offers insight into the reasons why individuals choose to remain in a city that's often struggling. Michael Streissguth is a professor in the Communications and Film Studies Department at Le Moyne College, where he teaches mass media, writing, and English literature. His work has been published in the Washington Post magazine, Salon, Rolling Stone, and many other publications. He is currently working on a documentary film about public school integration in the 1970s. A question and answer session will follow Professor Streissguth's talk. And now, please welcome our speaker, Michael Streissguth.
Thanks very much, Mary Beth. And thank you to the Strathmore Speakers Series for having me. And thanks to Alyssa Newton and Scott Likwitz, our MC for this evening, for arranging this. It's a real pleasure to be able to be with you and to talk about Syracuse and talk about this book. And I think if you're tuning in this evening, you probably have some investment in Syracuse, some concern about cities. And I hope we can talk about that. And I hope we can have plenty of time after my talk and some reading to discuss your questions and your comments. To get started, I want to tell you a little bit about how I came to write this book. My wife and I moved to Syracuse about 22 years ago from the Washington, D.C. area. And my wife was expecting our second child. And we sort of just dived into the neighborhood community life. I live in the Strathmore neighborhood, like many of you do, in the southwestern part of the city. And the community life is fantastic here. But after about 22 years and our kids began to achieve a level of independence, I kind of looked up and looked around and realized that I didn't know the city of Syracuse as well as I felt like I should have. And I'm a writer, and one way that writers explore the world is by researching and writing. And so that's what I did. And it was really important for me, as I thought about this project, to think about the question, why do people stay in a city like Syracuse that can be a challenging place to be, but of course also a quite wondrous place to be as well. But those of you who live in the area know that we continue to lose population. So I was curious about that question, as I noted people coming and going in our midst here in Syracuse. And I wanted to pursue that question through 5 individuals who are making life work in Syracuse. Some of them are longtime residents, and some of them have only been here for a few years. But that was the idea, to explore the city through their observations, their reflections, and also through the experiences that they have here. So that was how I pursued this. And I wanted to, I wish that all 5 of these individuals could be with us tonight, because they're such enthusiastic people. They're people who have a vision for the city of Syracuse, and they have great energy and in trying to pursue that vision of the city. And I also hope that People in cities like Syracuse or around the country will read this book and perhaps be moved to some reflection about their own experiences in their own cities. These five individuals are, I think, represent some hope and kind of embody the building blocks of a city. And in some cases, they point to a way forward when elected officials and appointed officials either can't or don't do that. So the book invests a lot of hope in the experiences and the vision of the main characters of this book. And thinking about the relationship between these five Syracusans and the political leadership in the city and in the area reminds me of a passage from a new book actually called Metropolis by Ben Wilson. And Wilson says in his book that, quote, urban areas thrive when there is a dynamic interplay between the unplanned informal city and the official planned city. So I'm thinking also tonight about an unofficial Syracuse embodied by the five people and an official Syracuse. And I want to read to you just, I'll read a few times this evening, but I want to introduce you to the characters in the very early going. But tonight I will really only focus on one of the figures in the book, and that is Stefan Green, who I'll introduce here in a second. So, inspiring people who work across social and emergency services populate Syracuse. Teachers, volunteer coordinators, directors of nonprofits, police officers, counselors, and nurses. They shoulder many burdens of this city that time and the national conversation may have forgotten. Teaching the illiterate, counseling rape victims, confronting violence on the streets, hunting down shelter for the homeless, treating the drug addicted, nurturing refugees from war-afflicted nations. They must be resolute in thinking that life can be better in Syracuse, or why would they do what they do with such heart? Which points to the overriding question of this book. In a city hemorrhaging people and jobs, is there reason to stay? Cities blossom when people in them find purpose, and they wither when they have nothing left to offer. If the city is to discover another moment, then its people must remain to nurture and lead, or else it may follow the once great African city of Timbuktu, now slowly melting into the desert, and the former auto capital of Detroit, popular today among so-called ruin porn gawkers. For now, many still make life work in Syracuse, but will the city continue to give them a reason to stay? Five people whose lives are intertwined with the city's help answer that question in this book. Jesse Lyons, an urban farmer attempting to grow community and a local food movement. Neil Murphy Jr., a city elder and former chancellor at SUNY ESF, who's hell-bent for better water management and smarter government. Elise Baker, an activist and downtown florist, whose one and only real concern is the dispossessed. Justo Triana, a hardworking refugee from Cuba who gives as much as he receives by teaching English to fellow refugees. And then finally, Stefan Green, a young man and the primary figure in this narrative who almost sank into the city's streets only to bob up again as youth, diversity, and hope personified. Their experiences and perspectives, as they relate them in their own words, plainly and valuably reveal what it's like to live and work in a city on the edge, providing insight into how people discern hope as they decide if a city can remain a sheltering place. This book strives to give readers a sense of Syracuse as it lives around the five subjects, contextualizing their extended commentary and storytelling with appealing secondary characters and various episodes, such as a tragic Father's Day riot and the trial that followed, sidewalk fistfights, Elise Baker's community raising convocation, and public debates over a regional consolidation proposal. The narrative also pays particular attention to Stefan Green's family, who arrived in Syracuse in the late 1940s astride a huge influx of African-American people. Representing a 70-year-long thread, the family story tracks many of the city's crucial issues: racism, urban renewal, drug abuse, the hope of upward mobility, and most importantly, the question over whether to leave the city or stay, which Stefan must grapple with in 2020. As Syracusans go, the 5 commentators in this book are not necessarily unique, but they are thoughtful and quietly energetic. And like many of their fellow citizens, they keep the city moving from one day to the next. Framed by a hometown rife with violence, still hobbled by industrial collapse, and often narrow in its thinking, they sketch out the city's tragic past and tumultuous present, but embodying tenacity, innovation, reform, and redemption, they also propose a vision for Syracuse and for struggling cities everywhere, a rolling path away from oblivion and back into the national sunlight. So, Stefan Green, he is a young man right now, around the age of 30. And as I said in the reading, his grandparents, Ted and Willa Hostin, traveled and migrated from South Bend, Indiana. Their roots were in the Deep South in the 1940s. And they settled in the 15th Ward, as many of you know, was the longtime home of many African-American people in Syracuse. It's important to note that they chose Syracuse. And when Ted Hostin, Stefan's grandfather, arrived in the city directory listed him as a stock clerk. And I believe that was at the Schrafft's restaurant in the city. And in the book, one of his older sons, and this would be one of Stefan's uncles, provides a rich description of the 15th Ward in the 1950s and the 1960s. He had blues music and country music drifting out of homes and taverns all around him in the 15th Ward. There were Black independent business owners. And he describes one particularly, I would say, hopeful moment in a movie theater on Salina Street in downtown Syracuse, in which the Black kids and the white kids were dancing in the aisles to Rock Around the Clock, the Bill Haley in the Comments song, which was featured in the film Blackboard Jungle back in the 1950s. Again, a rich experience that Ted and Willa Hostin's family seemed to be having. Maurice's younger brother, Ken, again, another uncle of Stefan Green's, by the 1960s is playing in an integrated band, a rock band, and a rock and R&B band. And when urban renewal comes to downtown Syracuse and essentially shaves the 15th Ward from the landscape, the Hostins moved to community housing on Westmoreland Street. And Ken Hostin describes an integrated world in which his friends are white and Hispanic and Native American, and his family socializes with all of the races that are represented in that particular housing community. At this stage, Ted and his family, Ted and Willa, are heading into the middle class. Ted is working for a cleaning service, and then he opens his own cleaning service. And actually, for a while, he had a contract at Lemoyne College, where I currently teach, and where Stefan Green currently works. Let me tell you, people, that Ted Hostin even took up golf, the sport of kings, right? And which lets you know what his status was and where his interests were. So Syracuse, for Ted and Willa Hostin, is a nurturing, giving place. It's providing opportunity, and again, a reason to choose to stay. But in the 1960s, it's not all pretty, as Ken Hostin told me, and I want to read you a little bit about what he observes as the 1960s roll on in Syracuse. While the 1960s raced on and letters from Maurice arrived from army bases all over the world, Rob took up the bass and older brother Ken the electric guitar. Together, they joined a racially integrated band that played all over Syracuse and in the county. When people walked in a club and saw the band for the first time, they assumed it was either soul or rock, but the Salt and Pepper congregation played everything from Wilson Pickett to the Rolling Stones. Ken said, "From what I recall, somebody only shouted something once." Avoiding specific mention of the epithet. And I'm saying, Ken, it's Rob that I'm quoting from here, an uncle. There weren't so many black rhythm guitar players like Ken standing up there playing Beatles stuff, Rob said. It would kind of throw people a little, and he did it really good. I guess we educated a few people back then. We were just guys out there playing, and we were happy going into clubs and parties and frat houses. They just loved the band. Then, on a day that seemed like every other day, the din of cars and trucks on the new Interstate 81 and bulldozers taking down the last of the 15th Ward in the background, Rob discovered that the racial terrorism of the 1960s had finally come to Syracuse. He said, "One night, my brother, myself, and some of the guys in the band and a couple of other friends were going to May Memorial Church on Genesee Street to hear a band. So we went into the place, and there was a fraternity there from Central Tech High School, which was downtown at the time. My brother and I were the only black guys in the group, and they wanted to beat us up, kill us. They had their knives out. There were 5 of us and 20 of them. They were calling us all names. That was pretty scary until the minister came out and got in the middle of things. We backed out and drove to this club called Wanda's. I believe Wanda's today is the Lost Horizon, because one of my friends knew some people who were down there from our high school, which was Nottingham. So we told them what happened, and they actually got in cars and went out and found these guys from Central Tech. When they came back, they said, 'We took care of them for you. You're not going to have anybody bothering you.' And these were all white guys. These were tense times. I was in the cafeteria once, and a racially motivated fight broke out. Some of the white kids would go to the other schools and start stuff, and that's what happened that particular day. They happened to pick on some of the black athletes, which was kind of a mistake. It was an awful thing to see. The principal ended up getting hit in the head with a chair. It was one of the worst things I'd ever seen along those lines." By this time, and going into the 1970s, there is what you might call a rupture in Ted and Willa Hostin's family that is not unlike, I suppose, the rupture that the city itself is experiencing at the time. Some of their children are choosing that path to the middle class, and some are choosing another way. Specifically, their daughter Deborah is choosing the drug culture on the South Side. And Deborah is Stefan's mother. And I'll just read to you her descriptions of the life that she was leading. While Stefan sampled street life around the pioneer homes, his mother floundered. She had begun snorting cocaine in the 1970s when she met Stefan's father, who was a dealer. She'd steal a few hits from his retail supply, but she brushed away the powder when she encountered crack, which decimated the using community in the 1980s, claiming lives and sending dealers to prison for long stretches. The hard-hitting drug made national headlines in 1986 when University of Maryland basketball player Len Bias, on the eve of a promising career with the Boston Celtics, died after smoking it. Recently, Deborah sipped a bottle of water in a downtown coffee shop and recalled her first taste. "This girl I knew from a long time ago," she says. "She was telling me something about cooking drugs. Her and her husband invited me over, and we sitting there having drinks, and he has this glass rocker, and he was putting stuff in there, and I was sipping on my gin. I was drinking gin back then. I said, 'What's that?' She said, 'This is a crack pipe.' He had this funny shaped glass thing, and he put the crack rock in there and told me to pull. The smoke was going all around in it, and that was it. I was always trying to chase that first feeling after that, and I never found it. I never felt it again. Everybody that's gotten high off crack will tell you the same thing. It became a job," she said. "I knew things was out of hand because I would get up in the morning and get cleaned up and do everything I was supposed to do. And then I would start thinking about, how am I going to get some money to get high? And that might start at 3 or 4 in the afternoon. And then we was on a roll all night until the next morning, until I finally got tired and laid down to go to sleep." So Stefan, her son, is growing up in his mother's addiction. And as he enters adolescence, drug dealing is a pull. It's, of course, very common in the South Side community that he was living in. Petty crime was a pull. And of course, school for him became optional. I will tell you that Deborah is clean now. She's recovered and is not has not been pulled back into that lifestyle. But Stefan had a support network, and that included his uncles, that included people in the public schools, particularly one individual by the name of Elise Baker. And if you remember, Elise Baker, who's a downtown florist and a community activist, is working for the school district at the time and takes a particular interest in Stefan. But Stefan also has to make his own choices, and he ultimately chooses to reject the lifestyle that his mother had been living in. He chooses another path, and that path takes him to high school graduation. He graduated from Corcoran High School, where my children went to school. He attended OCC, and then finally graduated from Lemoyne College, and went to work as a producer at WCNY television, and that experience is documented in the book. And then, as I mentioned a moment ago, he has most recently come to work at Lemoyne College. And just to kind of give you a sense of where Stefan's head is right now, I have a passage that I want to read that kind of tells you where he is, sort of between worlds, if you will, here in Syracuse. And Stefan is a very thoughtful individual, and he very methodically walked me through in the book some of the South Side culture and some of the issues that many of those in the African American community are confronting, including some fraught encounters with police, as well as some of the homegrown crime that is in the neighborhoods that Stefan has lived in since he was a child. But just to just a little passage that features Stefan. Ted and Willa Hostin's vision of themselves in Syracuse must have shone like morning sunlight while they motored east across the flat Midwest in the late 1940s. But their grandson, Stefan Green's place in the city seemed murky as the new year dawned. Certainly, he had picked up the cord of life that his mother had let go of decades before, resurrecting in his own particular lineage his grandparents' estimation of Syracuse's promise. But where, he asked, did the city figure in the promises he made to himself? Recalling protagonists in great works by African-American writers like Richard Wright, Ralph Ellison, and James Baldwin, Stefan found himself between two worlds, transcending tragic elements of the city's South Side, but not quite trusting the middle class's extended hand. He says, "There's one particular piece of literature that opened the door, Narrative of the Life of Frederick Douglass. Douglass says when he learned to read that he realized then he wasn't like the other slaves, but he still wasn't like white people. That was the first time I read or learned that this was a feeling that I was also having. It was a conscious decision for me to say, I don't want to be like everything else I know, and I have to be something different. Selling drugs and being in the streets wasn't for me. It wasn't my character type. As much as I tried to adhere to it or be like my uncles and be like people in my life that I know that live like this, I really couldn't. I had to consciously tell myself that I was going to go to school and do all those things. I feel like I ostracized myself from some of my friends. My closest friends I'm still really close to. They're proud of me, but I do find myself not talking about certain things around them. I don't want them to feel like I'm better than them. It's weird that being Black in America, you want to be just as good and you want to feel equal, but at the same time, you don't want to feel better than other Black people, and you don't want other Black people thinking that you're better than them. It's something that my grandmother used to say. It's, quote, being an uppity N-word. It's a harsh term to use, but it's something that's been around a long time before me. A selfish part of it is wanting to brag about what you do, feel proud of it. I'm lucky enough to have close friends to tell about my job. I want to brag about those things, but I also want to educate. As a young Black man, it's not only good to show young people that there's more out there than basketball or football or rapping. It's a responsibility. It's an obligation when people need me to speak somewhere or do anything to help young Black men. It's literally an obligation as a young Black professional. It's also an obligation and a responsibility to do things outside of that, to not cheat on my wife, to not do the things that we're so known for, to not be angry, to not do those things. You got to show people who are younger than you that it's okay to want to go to school. It's okay to want to have an education. It's okay to do things that people don't think you should be doing, like wanting to be a filmmaker or an artist. And I'm happy to report that Stefan, who could go anywhere in the country to work in education or to work in video production, continues to choose Syracuse. And the other four characters also in the book also discuss that choice. And Neil Murphy, for example, who was the CEO, the president of O'Brien and Gear engineering company, and then later the president of SUNY ESF, came to Syracuse in the 1960s and studied at Syracuse University and had the opportunity to have a fellowship in England, I believe. But his wife was expecting at the time, and they didn't want to move. And they decided to stay in Syracuse. And the contributions that he's made over the years are really incredible, ranging from the cleanup of Onondaga Lake, an ongoing process, to leading the discussion around the consolidation of city and county government. One of the, I think, the big issues that this city is kind of letting pass by. But that decision to stay was so great for the city. And Justo Triana. Justo was a refugee from Cuba. He came to Syracuse because he didn't want to do what all Cubans do, he said, and settle in Florida. He wanted to explore America, and he came here. And he eventually was able to bring his family here, and he teaches English to non-native speakers, contributing to the life of the city. But he also says, and this may be hard for you to believe, he talks about how it's so great to live in a cold weather climate because it teaches an important lesson, and that is that you have to prepare. You have to get ready for what the seasons are going to bring to you, and that is so great for he believes, for his children's development. Elise Baker, who I've mentioned, she moved here as a child from Mississippi. She's a community activist. Her one real concern is the dispossessed of the city of Syracuse, and she's always thinking about ways to help her community through various different activities that she plans, teen dances and cabaret nights for older people in her neighborhood. And she says, you know, I could have left here long ago. There are many places I could have gone, many places where there are family members who would welcome me. But then she says, who would do what I do in my community if I did leave? And so it's moments like that that I think redeem Syracuse and provide hope. And not to forget Jesse Lyons, who's the manager and the founder of the Brady Farm on the South Side. It's the Brady Faith Center's urban farm. She came here from Portland. That's where she's from, and she too, her husband is a scholar at Cornell University. They have many options also in their lives, but they choose to stay here because of this vision of a local food movement, and also a vision of employment development that the urban farm also provides. So I had to tell you that the process of writing this book did provide an education about my adopted hometown here, and I had to, and what the 5 figures in the book kind of forced me to do was to kind of set aside some of my own personal concerns and gripes about Syracuse. The I-81 issue is kind of high on my list of questions that the city faces. Tax breaks for developers, careless love from Albany. But I just had to put that aside because those issues really weren't at the forefront of the figures in the book. Their primary concerns were more day to day. They were micro. They had to do with improving the world, the small worlds that they live in, and ultimately, what I learned is that that's where there was hope in those individuals who had chosen to stay and chosen to move their worlds forward so as to benefit those around him who are also in Syracuse. So with that, I would love to hear your questions and of course any comments that you might have. The book, by the way, is available on Amazon and Barnes and Noble and all those regular places where you can find books. So.
Whoops. Okay, thank you,
I think
Michael, for doing that for us. Open up the for discussion, for questions or anything like that. You guys can either unmute yourselves and speak if you'd like, or you can type it in the chat. Susan Markle said, thank you, Michael, for sharing your book. She said she was a resident of Syracuse from 1967 until 2019, and after selling her house and moving to Rochester. But she misses the community and friends and neighbors in Strathmore. So, yeah. Any questions?
Great.
So John DeMott asked, what gives your subjects optimism for Syracuse's future?
Hey, John, thanks for your question. I think it differs for each of them, but for example, Neil Murphy, who is retirement age, but he refuses to retire. I mean, he's nominally retired from SUNY ESF, but he continues to be involved in many water projects, but also many civic discussions as well. And it broke his heart when one of his daughters and her husband and their children left to move to Atlanta. And that's probably a story that many people here are familiar with, young people leaving. And my wife Leslie and I have 3 children, and they're currently not in Syracuse. And I wonder if they're coming back. But Neil Murphy tries to convince his daughter that indeed Syracuse is a place where there is opportunity. Children are often convinced that the opportunities are in other cities, and in fact, I think we have to admit that that's often true. But his real hope is that Syracuse can make some of the big decisions that can help bring people to Syracuse, and of course want to stay in Syracuse. And for him, it's that consolidation movement, again, that merges city and county and village services, and also provides for a one government approach. And it's not just for efficiency, it's not just to save money, it's kind of to create community and create understanding among all of us here in Onondaga County, in order that we might move forward and thrive as a region. So I think that that's kind of one of the big things, the big ideas, if you will, that can really make a difference and kind of represent that political part of Syracuse that can provide leadership. In addition to that, I mean, I'm sure many of you have been following the debate over I-81 and what to do with the 1.4 mile viaduct that runs through downtown. That is still not a resolved issue. I know a lot of us are thinking that, oh, the community grid is coming to Syracuse. Well, I hope that's where we're going, but there's still resistance. And I see the Save I-81 billboards all over the place. And I would hate to see that big idea pass Syracuse by. And so for people like Neil Murphy, it's some of the big infrastructure type of changes that could happen. For Elise Baker, the community activist that I spoke about, it's the children on her block who may not end up selling drugs, which provides hope for her. And she's such an amazing person. She has, I said, a downtown florist just down from Cafe Cubal on Salina Street. And I've sat out front of that store with her pre-COVID times. And she knows virtually every person who walks by. She knows them from her neighborhood. She knows them from the jobs in the school system that she's had. And she's always checking up on them and asking how they are. And one day we were walking along Salina, and there was a man who appeared to be a refugee, and he was looking for the local federal offices in order to deal with something with regard to his immigration, and he was lost. And she grabbed him by the arm and pulled him right down the street to those offices. And so for her, it's a very micro thing. It's changing one person at a time that can provide hope. So John, many different answers to that question. Each of the 5 persons, I think, would say something different.
Okay, we're going to go to Susan Nielsen, who has a question.
Hey, Sue.
Hello, Michael, and I'll just acknowledge that I'm a Streissguth family fan from way back when.
Yes.
Mike, and maybe this question is sort of prompted by you focusing on Stefan Green for tonight, but I think that whole elephant of the room, 15th Ward, racial issues, just wondering what thoughts you might have. I'm presuming that you've seen the information about the Vera House. Yes or no about the difficulties with some of the directors of one of their support organizations signing? Oh, well, suffice it to say, if you check Syracuse.com or CNYCentral.com, there's information there. And basically, my short capsule of it is that the phrase white supremacy was used in a statement that Vera House did as part of a strategic planning session. And to those, why do people stay and why do people leave? And sometimes little words trigger, but people need to remain in the conversation to attempt to understand one another. If you leave the conversation, we'll never get there.
Yes.
So I guess you can't answer my question on your observations on that, but very much appreciate your talk, as I always do, and love to all you guys.
Well, love to you, Sue. It's great to see you. Great to see you. I will say this, that the experience of writing the book was my attempt to try to understand, and I think that's one thing that we can all do, and that's what writing forces a person to do, is to kind of get out of the house, get out from behind the computer, and meet people and talk to people and understand our neighbors in this city. And I think we need more of that. And I need more of that.
Okay, so the next question comes from Patty Black, one of the Strathmore Speakers founders. Mike, if you could do anything you want, no limitations, what would you do to improve the city?
Well, I think that I would wave my magic wand around one of these big issues that I just mentioned, whether it's consolidation or the community grid, and I think I'd have to choose consolidation. I think that's there are those who fear it for a number of reasons, both people in the city and people who live in the suburbs, but I think that could be a real game changer for this region. Thanks, Patty, and another great neighbor.
The next question comes from Liz Patrone, and she says, "Hi, Mike. I'm curious what you think we as your readers can do in the community to help encourage Syracuse to thrive."
Yeah, I think it's what I hope the book can do is to help us reflect on what our place in Syracuse is. And there are so many people in this Strathmore neighborhood and across the city who on a day-to-day basis are involved in activities that move the city forward, that keep us going, and it's really inspiring. And I would urge people to reflect on what their role is. What is their role in Syracuse? Because everybody can have one. And then I think it's also about getting to know the city, getting to understand the issues, getting to understand the challenges people have, and getting to understand those people who are our neighbors. So my inspiration again are these 5 people who on a day-to-day basis they haven't given up on Syracuse at all. They have not given up on Syracuse, and that's what Syracuse needs, and other like cities need as well. So thanks, Liz, another Strathmore author.
Yes, we will be, I think Mary Beth will have more on that later. Alyssa Newton asks, have you connected with any of the people in the book post-COVID, and do they still have the same vision, or have their priorities changed?
Yeah, I've connected to everybody. So first of all, as soon as the book came out and I gave everybody a copy of the book, I wanted to kind of meet with them and get their reaction. And I was kind of wincing as to what their reaction might be. But fortunately, I think the book passed the test. And there's some particularly sticky moments involving some of the political figures in the city as to how they related to the consolidation movement that Neil Murphy was co-director of, along with Jim Walsh. And I think reading some of that made him wince, but in the end he said, it was true. That's what happened. So I've spoken to everybody, and I continue on a regular basis to speak to people. In fact, just today, I was on the phone with Elise Baker, the community activist, and she was administering to and providing comfort to a family member who was ill and actually on his deathbed. But the power with which she described that moment just made my day and put some wind in my sails. So I wouldn't say that anybody's changed. Justo Triana has become a citizen. As I said, Jesse Lyons continues to expand the influence of the Brady Farm and the gospel, if you will, of local food and urban agriculture. So everybody is just still following a theme there. I'm glad to say. Thanks, Alyssa.
Let's see. Okay, and Travis Newton is usurping Alyssa's account to ask this question. He says, thanks so much for all of the work on this. As an outsider, having moved here from North Carolina almost 20 years ago, I've always been fascinated by what I call the Syracuse complex. People here think they don't deserve good things. What can we all do to combat that tendency?
Yeah, I think that comes with being involved and being involved in one's community. And of course, Travis Newton is a professor at Lemoyne College. He's been instrumental in growing the arts programs there. And he's somebody who has embraced the city and is working to make things work in the city. And I just think, again, I know I sound like a broken record, but to me, that's a remedy for so much, understanding and appreciating what is here in the city. I mean, I live, and many of you here live near Woodland Reservoir, and to walk up atop that reservoir on a warm afternoon with the sun setting and seeing that light bouncing off the downtown buildings is just incredible. There's nothing quite like it. Knowing that I can ride my bike across town to work in about a half an hour and drive there in 10 minutes is such a contrast to the congestion that I knew in the Washington, D.C. area. There's so many benefits here. Again, I think we have to come face to face, like many cities, we have to come face to face with what plagues us. But I think learning to embrace this city has a lot to do with what our perception of the city is. So thanks, Travis.
So I'll ask a question. Unless anybody else has any other questions. Mike, I know you said one of the characters was an urban farmer, and I was wondering if you could just speak a little bit about that, because I know that in New York City, where I am a recent transplant from myself, that movement has gained a lot of traction there. What's that like here in Syracuse, and is that something that maybe be integral to Syracuse's future?
I think it is, and we've seen the Brady Farm get involved in the old. I believe that was no James grocery store on the near west side. And
Mike, we lost you there for a minute. Are you still with us? Nope, we will hang out a minute and let hopefully Mike's internet catch up with him. Apologies, everybody. That is the one downside to the digital realm, is that sometimes we have buffering issues. Let's see. Okay, one moment. I'm just going to reach out to Mike and just see if he. Okay, Mike definitely got cut off. So for the moment, I'm going to wait for him to rejoin. And then James Morgan, I will ask your question once Mike is back in the room. This definitely doesn't happen at the fire barn. The speakers don't magically disappear and then get magically transported back in. So I guess everybody's going to see the digital librarian comedy hour until Mike returns. Trying to keep everybody entertained. Hopefully he'll join us. He'll join us back soon.
Somebody was saying on Facebook earlier that there was an internet issue in Strathmore. So I don't know if that's what Mike is dealing with.
Well, hopefully Mike will be back momentarily. Mary Beth, I guess while we're, here he is. He's back. Okay, we'll let him just join back up there. And let's see. Should be good to go.
sorry for that, but I'm back.
Oh, that's quite all right. We lost you right at the beginning there.
Yeah, I was just going to also say that a lot of my neighbors and people across Syracuse and the Newtons shop at the regional market. So that's the markets that have sprung up around the city. The Salt City Market, which will be opening soon downtown. I mean, all of these venues are connecting Syracusans with locally sourced food, which I think has sprouted from some of these markets, some of these farms, like the Brady Farm.
Okay, so there is a question from James Morgan. He asks, Mike, you commented briefly about government spending money to give businesses breaks with the intended impact of creating jobs, thinking many new jobs would solve many problems. Can you comment on this?
Yeah, hi Jim. Good to hear from you. The fact of the matter is I don't always see the payoff, right? I mean, this community, this region has extended millions and millions of dollars in tax relief to developers, and only to see those projects perhaps not reach fruition or accomplish the envisioned goal. Many of those jobs are low-paying jobs. I'm always astounded at the number of hotels that are receiving tax breaks in Syracuse, and I wonder if they are necessary. So yeah, I mean, again, that's something I didn't really address that, didn't write about that in the book, but that's just kind of one of my personal gripes. That I think the reader should be pleased that I put aside in the book and didn't rant about. So I won't rant now.
All right. Any other questions or pause for a moment? If not, I'm going to throw it over to Mary Beth, and she will have some final words for everybody.
Okay, I want to thank Mike Streissguth for your fascinating talk. I think there's just, I can't wait to read the book. What a great concept to take, the stories of different people and tell Syracuse history through them. I know I'm not the only one who's eagerly awaiting a copy of your book, and you can purchase or order the book in bookstores or online, but if you'd like a signed copy of Mike's book, stay tuned to our website and Facebook page for updates on a December book signing event. It will feature 2 more amazing local authors, Liz Patrone and Ed Griffin Nolan, whose books have recently been published. Liz is a nationally acclaimed blogger whose book, The Price of Admission, is flying off the shelves and through the mail, through Amazon. Ed's book is Nobody Hitchhikes Anymore. They will both discuss their books and then take questions. We're trying to work it out so you can pay for your book online and then pick up a copy that's signed by the author at Onondaga Free Library. So stay tuned to the website for that. That's Syracuse, SyracuseSpeakers.com. The date of that book signing event is tentatively scheduled for December 10th. It will be virtual. As soon as it's confirmed, you can find it on our website, StrathmoreSpeakers.com. And the Strathmore Speaker Series will kick off its 2021 season on Thursday, January 14th. Our featured speaker will be ESF Professor Hyatt Green, who is leading the COVID-19 wastewater monitoring project for the city of Syracuse and Onondaga County. Don't miss this relevant talk at 7 p.m. on January 14th. And I want to thank you all for joining us tonight, and we hope to see you again in December for Liz Patrone and Ed Griffin Nolan. Good night.